China denounces the United States over its terrible human rights record ranging from police brutality to global espionage. In a lengthy report, Beijing has said that Washington is, quote, haunted by spreading guns, violent crimes, and the excessive use of police force. It said the indiscriminate torture by the CIA against terror suspects, drone strikes, and spying are testimonies of how the United States has violated human rights in other countries. Washington has also been accused of failing to protect the political rights of its own citizens. The cabinet report, which is sourced mainly from U.S. media, is considered an annual tit-for-tat rebuttal to the U.S. criticism of China. The issue of human rights has long been a source of tension between the two countries, especially after the U.S. imposed sanctions on China, citing human rights in 1989. Well, writer and radio host Norman Stockwell joins us now from Madison to give us more insight on that story. Mr. Stockwell, some interesting issues raised by the Chinese cabinet pointing to the United States as being a major rights violator. Talk to us about these recent comments.
Yeah, well, I think this is not any particular new news. I think the United Nations, in fact, issued a very similar report just about a month ago, citing something like 348 different issues that the United States needed to address. So, you know, you hear it coming now from the Chinese in response to a U.S. report, but in fact, it's come from other bodies around the world. I think that we have a number of issues here in this country that have been coming to public awareness recently, particularly with a lot of the coverage of the killings of African American men in various cities across the country and the militarization of the police here in the United States. It's something that the rest of the world, I think, is very surprised at in a lot of ways, because we have so many deaths in this country due to gun violence, and as we've seen recently, disproportionately the number of African Americans that are being killed by police in these confrontations is very high.
Mr. Stockwell, the United States considers itself, it's a so-called defender of global human rights, but the issues that were brought up in this Chinese report, the issue of police brutality, the CIA use of the CIA torture campaign against terror suspects, and so on and so forth, is usually ignored when the United States is making accusations against other countries.
Well, I think the United States has a very proud history of democracy, and the founding of this country was based on response to repression. And so it's something that the United States does hold very dearly as its values. But if you look at the practical application, if you look at what happens now in day-to-day life, what we've seen is a greater disparity between rich and poor in this country, and I think an increase in racial-based violence in the United States that has been growing and is only exacerbated by this militarization of the police force. Now, the other issues that you mentioned, that were mentioned in the Chinese report and also in the UN report in May, the use of drone strikes, apparently extrajudicial killings by the United States, that is, killings of people without any kind of due process, and also I think many other places where we really need to do some self-examination here in this country and make sure that we live up to the values that we espouse.
Writer and radio host Norman Stockwell joining us from Madison. Thank you, sir.